Order. Please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Good afternoon and welcome to the February 25th meeting of City Council. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councilor Brasciani, seconder. Councilor Fendura, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. And the minutes from January 28th. Motion for that, please. Councilor Hawkins, second by Councilor Brasciani. Any discussions, errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Move on to committee reports. Councilor O'Donnell? Okay. No, I just thought you might have a motion, that's all. Okay. Usually it's done at the beginning of the meeting, I think. I think it's done at the beginning of the meeting because it's part of the agenda to move it into.
I'm sorry, I was going to do it at this time.
I'll give you the floor, Councilor O'Donnell.
Okay, thanks. So a little bit later on this evening, we'll be dealing with a notice of motion. It is within the purview of council if that motion is dealt with here or can be dealt with here if there is a unanimous vote of members of council. I'm making that request that we consider it at this time or at a little bit later in the meeting. And the reason, I would like to provide a reason, is that we expect that sometime in the month of March there will be a meeting of the board of the PCC, and we would like to take that forward at that time. So there's my request.
Okay, so that requires unanimous consent to put it on the agenda. I'm going to call the question. All those. Pardon me?
I'd like to speak to it.
I think it's either yes or no, Councilor Hawkins. Either we agree or don't agree.
It's a motion.
It's not typically done. It's not, nor is it in the bylaw to speak on it. It's either yes or no.
I don't think that's correct. Your Worship, I don't think that's correct. It's a motion.
Well, let's see what Councilor
Motion spoke. I'd
we'll
like to
see what
speak as
the
well.
clerk says on the bylaws on the procedure bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only specification in the procedure bylaw is with respect to the notices of motion, which is on section 29, and it basically says, it lays it out. As Councillor O'Donnell has moved, he wants that waived. The requirement is that the waiving of it needs to be unanimous. That's all the bylaw says. So the request to do so has to be unanimous, otherwise it falls back to just being noticed this evening.
So we're not debating the issue. We're debating whether or not to allow this to be spoken tonight. So it's a simple question of yes or no. So I will ask the question. Those in, on what basis?
Well, this is a notice of motion. The reason we have notice of motion is so the public can have an idea about what is happening at the meeting, so they can come to the delegation presentation.
Yep.
And on that basis, I'm going to oppose the motion.
You can do that, but it's in the right of, it's in the right. Councillor, order, please. Order. We have the right under the procedure bylaw for any member of council to ask for waiving of notice. It's happened in the past. Simple question is, do you want to do it or not? I think we know the answer already. There's no debating that. It's simply a yes or no answer. So I'll ask those who favor putting this on the table for discussion tonight. All those in favor?
Agreed.
Those opposed? You agreed, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel, are you there? It's not there. Motion is defeated. So both motions will be considered at next month's meeting of council. Executive Committee, Councillor Brasciani.
I bring forward a CR 19-13. This is out of scope general wage increase 2019. The recommendation, the out of scope employees receive 1% general wage increase for 2019 retroactive to January 1st, 2019.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brasciani. Have a seconder for that, please. Councillor Stevens. Mr. City Manager, do you have any comments on the report?
Through your worship, the report in front of you recommends a 1% general wage increase for our out-of-scope staff for 2019. We believe that 1% is recognition in terms of the economic situation that our organization, our community, and our province is seeing. It's consistent with negotiated settlements with CMM, and we are in negotiations presently with some of our other in-scope bargaining units, and we believe that this really provides a reasonable increase for our out-of-scope staff, which comprise about 8% of the city's workforce of approximately 2,800 employees.
Thank you, City Manager. Discussion on the report. Councilor Bertrand, do you have any other further comments on this? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. 2019 appointments to boards and nomination to the Airport Authority. Councilor Bertrand.
14. The 2019 appointments to boards and nominations to Regina Airport Authority. The recommendation is, number 1, that Dave Towers be appointed to the Board of Revision for a term of office March 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. Number 2, that Tim Gross, representing Saskatchewan Housing Corporation, be appointed to the Mayor's Housing Commission for a term of office March 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2021. Number 3, that the following individuals be nominated to the Regina Airport Authority for a term of office as indicated. Trent Fraser, May 1st to 2019 to April 30th, 2020. Bernadette McIntyre, May 1st, 2019 to April 30th, 2020. Number 4, that the following individuals' terms currently appointed to the Regina Airport Authority be extended until April 30th, 2020. This is Jim Kilkenny, Carter Willocks, and Renu Kapoor. Number 5, that the following individual be appointed to the Regina Public Library Board for a term of office as indicated below. Alojamaki Oni, March 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2020. That the members appointed to each board, committee, and commissions to continue to hold the office for the term indicated for each vacancy or until their successors are appointed.
Thank you, Councilor Bertrand. Have a seconder for that, please. Councilor Fundura. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Finance and Administration. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of the Finance and Administration Committee, I move the following. 1, that the property tax mitigation tools as outlined in Table 1, Part A in this report be approved and applied to both the future long-term growth and southeast mitigation categories. 2, that the property tax exemptions described in option 2 of this report be approved. 3, that the city solicitor be instructed to prepare the necessary bylaw to provide for property tax exemptions described in option 2.
Have a second for that, please.
One more.
Is there another one?
More clause.
Okay.
4, that the Executive Director, Financial Strategy and Sustainability, or his delegate, be authorized to apply for the following approvals. A, to the Government of Saskatchewan on behalf of the property owners for any exemption of the education portion of the taxes payable to the Government of Saskatchewan that is $25,000 or greater. And B, to the Regina Roman Catholic Separate School Division number 81 on behalf of the property owners for any exemption of the education portion of the taxes that is payable to the Regina Catholic Separate School Board Division number 81.
Thank you. Second for that, please. Councilor Bertrand. Good. Do you speak to it?
I'll speak only very briefly to it. This arises out of the boundary allocations that were done in 2014. At that time, certain agreements and understandings were entered into with respect to how the new taxation regime apply to the annexed lands. In this case, option 2 reflects the reasonable expectations of the property owners given the discussions that were had with the city, and the Finance and Administration Committee felt that as a result, this formula should be maintained.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Discussion on the report. Councilor Stevens.
Thank you. For starters, through the chair, could administration provide a rationale for this type of mitigation policy? And second, is this a standing policy that's been observed for a number of years, or do we kind of work on it on an ad hoc basis?
Ms. Howlick? Or do you want, okay. Go ahead. Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship. So perhaps a little bit of background would be helpful here. This is a fairly unique item. So back in 2013, a boundary altercation took place with respect to the city boundaries that brought some lands in from the RM, I believe, of Sherwood. And as a result of that, Council at that point in time, 5 years ago in 2014, reviewed the property taxes associated with the lands that were brought in. So at that point in time, of the lands that were brought in, Council categorized the properties into 3 categories. And so really the item before you today relates to that 3rd category of properties. So I would say that this is a fairly unique circumstance. And secondly, it relates to mitigating some of the impacts from those lands being brought into the city limits.
Great, thank you very much. Through the chair, if I were to look at the package of services that properties in those areas would receive from fire, police, road maintenance, you name it, do they still receive the same level of services?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, so I'd say the general services like police services, etc., would certainly be received by these properties. However, depending on where these properties are located, the level of service may vary, i.e. water, water utility, the level of service, for example, provided to them will vary.
Okay, thank you. To that point, through the chair, those services would otherwise be delivered through a utility bill, correct? Rather than property taxes?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, in that particular case, that would be the case.
Great, thank you very much. In the report, there seems to be a unique area, the Southeast Mitigation Area. If you look at the map, it seems across the street there's a mitigation, then right back to back there's no mitigation. Can administration explain why it looks like a bit of a checkered board of property that does or does not receive mitigation, since it's in the same area?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll maybe make a few comments and then ask Ms. Bryden whether she has anything to add. So there are a number of reasons. First off, if the property tax rate that the rural municipality was charging at the point in time it came to the city was within $10, city tax rate applied. As well, if subsequent to those properties being brought into the city, they were developed, that the city tax rate would apply to a developed property. And I don't believe Ms. Bryden has any. I'll refer to Ms. Bryden.
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing else to add. That's pretty much covered it.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Through the chair, if I look at the list of properties that receive mitigation, some it's maybe a few $100s for the most part. There's a long list here. But to the city, it's actually a substantial amount. So correct me if I'm wrong, but between 2019 and 2023, we'd essentially be forfeiting $1.8 million in property taxes. If we go with the 2019 to 28 option, it's $2.1 million that we won't be collecting in taxes. Is this correct?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, the property taxes that would be foregone through the mitigation or the property tax exemption are outlined in the options, so that would accurately reflect the deferral.
Okay, thank you. Another question about the Southeast Mitigation Area. I remember this through the chair. This was kind of a topic we had to discuss with regards to the industrial service agreement fees. We reduced that level. That land fits into the 500,000 population range, but if it was populated with industry prior to that projected date, would we then be forfeiting more property taxes if those lands were developed at a faster pace than we anticipated?
Hypothetically speaking, Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Your Worship, I'll refer that question to either Ms. Bryden or Ms. Mills for a response.
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Mr. Chair, once the properties are developed, they become taxable.
Yes. Further to that question, we're anticipating, for instance, forfeiting about $1.8 million in tax revenue if the assessed value stays as it is. If the assessed value increases during that time, if that land's developed, would we not then be forfeiting more and losing more tax revenue?
Ms. Biden?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the land is developed, it becomes taxable. So there would be no loss for the municipality.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Other questions? Councillor Bryce, do you have any comments? Is Councillor Flight on that? Okay. Any other
I'm
questions?
sorry, what was that?
Do you have any questions on the report? This is on the boundary alteration, property tax exemptions.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Hawkins on the council support policy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll read the recommendation of the Finance and Administration Committee. That the council support policy be amended to include the City Council website content management governance policy as outlined in Appendix A and the general housekeeping amendments as outlined in the body of the report. And two, that the city clerk conduct a review of the City Council website management governance policy 1 year from the date of approval and report the results back to the Finance and Administration Committee.
The seconder for that, please. Councillor Brashani.
Your Worship, I have serious reservations about this policy, which I expressed at the Finance and Administration Committee. It might be appropriate if I simply ask the administration to outline this policy and that I speak to it later.
It's fine. To administration. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. My office has done a review of our existing website content policy with a view to ensuring that it matches the upcoming launch of the redesign of Regina.ca. And at that time, council members, their individual web pages, my office will assist in providing service to that, keeping up with content, perhaps posting articles, information, pictures, etc., of things that are related to individual council members' responsibilities. What we have in the policy is to try to ensure that this policy and the framework that we're following keeps the content and the website at a very professional, very City of Regina focused level. So in the website policy that had been considered at F&A, it was deemed that the acceptable content for this would be ward or city news, information on community engagement opportunities or events, council members' particular views on city programs and services, or if there are current or council or committee agenda reports that they wish to comment on, as well as matters that impact or affect a wide range of areas in municipal jurisdiction. Now, on the other hand, there are a number of areas where the materials that we would publish or we would be asked to publish, we will decline. And that unacceptable content is also mentioned, outlined in Appendix A. Again, statements, information, or remarks that are non-factual, racially or sexually offensive, defamatory, discriminatory, disparaging, or harassment. Statements that may prejudice a municipal decision-making process. So, for example, you can't say something that might be getting out ahead of where council is already at with a decision. Specifically endorsing political candidates or parties, third parties, or other business interests here in the city, as well as the release of personal information or confidential information that is otherwise covered by the provisions of the Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And one of the caveats or one of the conditions that we put on that is that these will be reviewed by my office. But in a situation where a particular member of council had concerns with us saying, no, that is not appropriate, that could be appealed to the Integrity Commissioner. We met with the Integrity Commissioner last week, and he agreed that that would be something that he would do. So that basically is what this policy covers. And FNA also asked that we would look at this within a year and come back with a report saying, were there instances where there were problems? What kind of issues did we get? Because what will happen is you will have the councillor's website will be on regina.ca. And if an individual councillor also has a personal website, there will be a link provided to that. And that link will also tell the public or whoever's looking at this, you are now leaving the City of Regina website and you are now going to the personal opinions of that particular member. So that's the summary of where we landed at, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Clerk. Discussion on this? You want to continue on? Okay. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to state my concern, and I appreciate the clerk outlining this. I want to state my concern, and then I want to move a referral motion, which you may want to put after everybody's had a chance to get their
I think it'd
opinion.
be fair to let other people speak. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
My concerns are the following. I think that this code, in fact, amounts to a censorship code of councillors. I understand the need to maintain a certain level of decorum in the website, the web pages of councillors, but I think that can be achieved in two ways. First of all, it's achieved by the criminal code and by the human rights codes, which we're all subject to in our speech. And secondly, it can be achieved by a disclaimer. There's already one disclaimer, which for when you move from a councillor's web page to their own personal pages. I think at the top of the city web page there could be a similar kind of disclaimer that says these are the views of the councillor, not necessarily the views of the city, or that kind of wording. I'm concerned, so I think that this is better handled not through what amounts to a censorship code. It's better handled by a more conventional kind of way, especially given censorship of political speech is particularly a delicate subject. I note the following. There's no other jurisdiction that has this kind of code in place. Edmonton and Strathcona are looking at a code, but there's no other jurisdiction that has a code like this in place. I'm concerned about the wording of the code. For example, there's unacceptable comment. There's 4 categories listed. One of the categories is statement that may prejudice a municipal decision-making process. I have no idea what that means. It's very general. It's very broad. And given this is speech, you have to be concerned about that. I'm also concerned about endorsing political candidates or parties. No problem understanding what that is. Third parties or business enterprises. Well, third parties could be a councillor on a web page encouraging people to support the work of a charitable organization. I don't think it'll come to that, but this wording is broad enough to cause that difficulty. I'm also worried about the acceptable content, unacceptable content criteria and how this would be applied. If something is does not fall in the unacceptable content criteria, is it automatically acceptable or not? I don't know, because the acceptable content is listed, and it may the issue may not fall within that list. So there's a kind of double. Is there a kind of double test there or not? It's not at all clear. And given that this is a free speech matter, clarity is really important. I also think it's important that a final decision on a matter like this be left with council. Maybe an outside adjudicator, such as the Integrity Commission, can give an advice to council. But if councillor's speech are to be censored in any way, I think that decision has to rest with the whole of council, and ultimately, I suppose, with the electorate. So what I'm going to do on the basis of those concerns, which I'm sure the administration has noted, I'd like to refer this matter back to the administration.
Should we see if other people want to speak
I understand
first?
that,
Yeah.
but I'm just giving notice that that's what I would like to do.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other speakers to the report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't feel restricted by this, and I think there should be oversight on something this new. And as we spoke in Finance and Admin about this, it became clear to me that it was similar to what we do for our bulletins that go out to our neighborhoods. People read them, and I can't think of anyone that's been told they couldn't put their own views in their bulletin. The other thing is this motion calls for review at the end of the year, and so I think if there's any concerns, that's when we can deal with it. This gives a link directly to your own personal website and media, and you can say whatever you wish on those websites. So this is not a stifling thing. I would support this.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Murray.
Thanks. Through the chair, my main concern when this was first brought forward was the ability for councillors, ourselves, and in the future to politicize municipal assets. So if we're looking at our web page in and of itself, that is a concern. What's been outlined here seems to address the vast majority of that by redirecting us to another page for any of those political discussions we may have. So I do support it as it's written. I probably won't be supporting the referral. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Stevens.
Through the chair, if I get some clarification, item 2, unacceptable content statements that may prejudice a municipal decision-making process. So in other words, if we were advancing a motion or we were co-authoring or supporting another motion, that would be prohibited, correct? We couldn't talk about a motion that's coming up or endorse it or summon public support?
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to Councillor Stevens' question, no, I would not agree that that's the intent. If you look at what is acceptable, it references current council or committee agenda reports or motions. What that is really doing is speaking to the potential that you may get out in front of something. You may be talking about a decision that has not come forward to council yet, or might be impacting one of our quasi-judicial boards by weighing in on something that you have no oversight or role in. Great, thank you.
Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was glad to see this coming forward because we've been talking about this for about 2 years. When we first came on council, it was something that we talked about. We wanted, we know how much work a newsletter is when we go to put that together, and that's a one-time thing. Not just that, though, it is the absolute cost of the newsletter. And when we look at that, this is the whole purpose that we wanted to go with an electronic version. But the second piece was to engage residents and to have an opportunity that they could not just hear information once a year from us. I like the fact that it will be reviewed after the year. I think that with this policy, it sets some guidelines, but that's the start. And I think then after the year, we could review it. So I do support this, and I think it's been something that we've been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Bryce, do you have any comments?
Not on this, thank you.
Okay. There's no other speaker, so I'll go back to Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have very little to add other than to say, normally in a free speech matter, you start with less restriction and move to more restriction. I'm a little reluctant to start with more restriction when I think a less restrictive regime is in place. So with that, I'll simply move the motion of referral.
Motion to refer. This is not debatable. Call the question. All those in favor of the motion?
Agreed.
Those opposed? Motion is defeated. So now we need a motion on the main motion as presented. If there's no other speakers on that, I will call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Bryce?
Opposed.
Motion's carried. Now move into Public Works and Infrastructure, the proposal RFP for engineering services for the Winnipeg Street overpass. Councillor Fundura.
Number 17, request for proposal, engineering services, Winnipeg Street overpass, realignment, issue, and award. Recommendation from the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee that the City Council authorize Executive Director of Citizens Services or delegate to issue a request for proposal and then to negotiate, award, and enter into contract with the highest ranked proponent from the public procurement process for engineering services for the Winnipeg Street overpass realignment project. 2, that the City Council authorize the City Clerk to execute the contract with the highest ranked proponent for engineering services upon review and approve from City Solicitor. And the committee adopted the resolution to concur in the recommendation is the report.
Thank you for that. A seconder for it, please. Councillor Young, discussion on this, Councillor Findura?
Just to, from the discussion from the committee, this bridge was built in 1975. It was rehabbed once in 1989 and rehabbed again, second time in 2003. Therefore, in 2010, engineering report came forward and indicated that the overpass was in a very poor condition. Hence, with that report, recommendation is here. The estimate for the new build would be realigning would be $28.8 million. The city part of this would be investment of $9.6 million. That's 33%. And we noticed already that the federal provincial governments are on board to help us with realigning. And what this will do with that north end of Regina by Winnipeg Street is we're realigning the bridge from the south going north. The bridge will not run into the middle of the store. The movement of traffic will be much better. And so the recommendation is to go through the looking for the engineering report, and the cost will be around $700,000 to about $1 million. That will give us what we're looking for. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I just want to ask a couple of questions. I enjoyed reading this report and the information. Truly, I did. And
it's good to hear.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so there was many options. So I just want to deal a little bit with the area north of the Ring Road, 9th Avenue North, and so on from there. So we historically have had a number of recreation amenities in that area. Depending on whether this is the accepted and actual built recommendation and so on, is there any impact to that area up there from the sports facility perspective first?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship. So in the 2013 work that was done, two options were presented. One option was to rebuild the bridge in the exact same space that it's in today. The second option was to realign Winnipeg Street. So I think what you'll see, and I'll maybe ask Mr. Kyle to comment further, I think what you'll see is a smoother flow of traffic into that north area, north of Ring Road, which is where the sports facilities are. So I think you'll find easier access into that area, and you'll see in the off-ramps, once they are realigned with Ring Road, you'll see a smoother flow of traffic into or back onto Ring Road and coming into the Winnipeg Street off Ring Road. Maybe ask Mr. Kyle to comment further.
Mr. Kyle.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. The scope of this project will end just north of 9th Avenue North. So at this time, it's not anticipated to impact the sports fields. The traffic flow may increase as a result of this alignment, but through future development to the north of Uplands, Winnipeg Street will be upgraded at that time.
Good, thanks for that. So I'll just ask another rather specific question. So when you enter Kaplan Field or go to the parking lots adjacent to Kaplan in particular, there is a particular road. So based on what's here, is that affected? Will it still be the same access to go west off of 12th Avenue North?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, I'll ask Mr. Kyle to comment.
Mr. Kyle.
Through you, Mr. Chair. At this time, there's no proposed work up in that area that would change the access configuration. The work we're talking about access is more around the access to the bulk water fill. South of that, how do we get large tankers in?
Okay, good. Thanks for that. Just a query about how we do these things. And so I find it interesting that in here the suggestion is how much this is going to cost, and then we're going out and asking folks, so can you build it? But we're suggesting a price. Can you walk me through why we say, here's the price, can you build it? Or, you know, why don't we see a surprise is what I'm saying.
We might get a surprise in the other way, though.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the problem. Mr. Onright.
I think what we put forward in the report is a range. And in order to move forward, we need council's approval because we do believe it will be in excess of $750,000. The range provided, knowing the total amount of the $28.8 million of the contract and where consultants normally will come in as a percentage of that, we provided the $700,000 to $1 million as the range, but we need approval at this time to move forward.
Good, thanks. I think at some point in time in near to future, depending on how many projects, I'll ask that question again kind of after the fact. I'm kind of curious how that kind of plays in, but I like what's here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bresciani.
We did have a discussion at committee, and one of the questions that was talked about, and it was in the media when this was announced, was the tracks. And if you can just kind of walk through that, there was some concern from residents asking, is this bridge going to go over the tracks, go under the tracks, or the tracks going to be removed? How will this bridge really benefit the safety around the tracks?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship. So the discussion at Public Works, there's two different projects. This bridge is specifically about the bridge and that specific area. The other piece of work coming forward by the end of Q2, which will be a report coming back to council, is about the at-grade crossings, which is another piece of work. Both of these could align if the at-grade crossing work comes forward. We are in communication with that project team also, and will ensure that moving forward, we keep those lines of communication open. We need to start the process on the Winnipeg Street Bridge because there's a lot of utility location, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Whether or not these two end up aligning or not aligning, that work needs to be done anyway. So it will not impact decisions coming forward or recommendations coming forward to council at the time of the report in terms of impact on either one of these projects. We will make sure they are in alignment as this moves forward.
Good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Bryce, do you have any questions?
No questions regarding this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions on the report? Call the question. Of those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The Executive Committee report. This is a semi-annual review of closed Executive Committee items. Someone could move that, please. Councillor Bresciani, a seconder. Councillor Young. Discussion on the report is receive and file. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two motions. First one is airport transit. Councillor Stevens, floor is yours.
For starters, could I get a seconder, please?
Seconder, Councillor Massanelli.
Terrific. Thank you very much. So foremost, this is a request for a report and information. And if you recall, a couple budgets ago, administration included in that budget deliberation some data and a high-level overview of what it would take to bring an airport transit stop or route online. What made me push this a bit more is a email from a resident, I believe he's in the audience tonight, who had suggested this goes back decades. And when I think about airports, I think about how important they are for our community as economic hubs, tourism, et cetera. It's actually identified in the Transportation Master Plan. And if I'm not mistaken, we're probably the last airport to not have some kind of public transit connectivity, which is a shame considering how close the airport is to the city. Unlike Saskatoon, where it's out in the northwest boonies, if you will, of the city, ours is very nicely located. I think having a public transit option to the airport serves a couple of functions. One is travelers, that makes sense. But otherwise, we also see those who are employed at the airport and the airport land. So I think it's part of this way of thinking more holistically about how important that place is from an economic development standpoint. The other thing I noticed that in the discussion at budget and before that about the airport shuttle, some challenges were identified. So really, as I see it, much of the heavy lifting has been done in terms of the logistics and cost. Now what I'm asking for is a more focused attention placed on how do we overcome those challenges, whether it's the quality of roads, the awkward timing, if you will, of when individuals require transit service at the airport, if I'm thinking about employees who work early morning and currently have no other options if they are without a vehicle and don't have the money for a taxi. And again, foremost is identifying the need for us to embrace the airport as an economic hub. And I think it only makes sense that we would service it with one of these very basic amenities that makes sense from a transportation standpoint. And specific to the consultation element, what I've put in the motion here is a focus on building a solution with the Regina Airport Authority as a partner. So I want to see solution building based on those kind of conversations. And that's why I come before you today with this motion. I'm looking forward to the discussion and hopefully support from Council.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. There are speakers. Councillor Murray.
Thanks. Just a quick question for administration on interactions with the Airport Authority in regards to this. Are they requesting to have it moved up in the Transportation Master Plan at all? Is that something that's been discussed?
Mr. Holden?
Because it is in there, just down the road.
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, so previous administration at the airport had a discussion with administration regarding their needs at the airport. As Councillor Stevens has indicated, there was a very high-level piece of work that was done looking at some options. There are some complications in providing service to the airport, one of those being the infrastructure that is out there today. But I think the current administration at the airport we've had very high-level discussions with them because the file had transferred over to the new CEO there. And questions around, could we provide service? What would that look like? And again, we have very high-level work done, so we don't have specific details or have looked at the specific details on what that would look like bringing it forward for council to consider that through, whether it be through the budget process or not.
So in order to receive that information for administration, would it require this report to understand the implications of that infrastructure at the airport? Or would that be something that's coming down the line anyway? That's my question.
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, no, we would ask for the motion to come forward to be able to present that work back to CPS. So for council's decision or request to do that work.
And the receiving committee would be Community and Protective Services for that report back?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So Andrew, despite what I'm going to say, I'm going to support the motion. I just want to clarify a couple of things. And I'm interested in why some airports might not have this as much as why you would want it. The obvious is the wanting. So as some of you know, recently I was out in Victoria. In Victoria, you can't get from the downtown to the airport, but I can get from the downtown to the ferry, which, by the way, it's just a road that deviates like this. It's within a half a kilometer, give or take. And it seems that the young man who's running our airport now used to be in Victoria. Might be a simple question to ask and include. Second one, and it's been a while, so I stand corrected, but Calgary has expanded its airport, so I think it's the third largest in Canada right now. I remember taking the C train out right to the end of the route and getting off the C train and looking right there is the airport, about 1.5 miles away. And so I called a cab to get to the airport. I assumed it went to the airport. And in my not frequent visits to Calgary Airport, I do not see any public transit there at all. Edmonton Airport is out of town, not out of town like in a different town. And so to my knowledge, there are only shuttle services, there is nothing there. And the one that I would compare then is Winnipeg. Winnipeg has a massive industrial area right around the airport, a warehousing area and so on. And so you literally take the bus from the front door and go anywhere you want in Winnipeg. That's the one that is comparison. I skipped Vancouver for a simple reason. They had the Olympics. And because of the Olympics, they have the Canada line. But and it, just worth mentioning, you pay a premium. When you get on the Canada line at the airport, you pay substantially more than if you got on downtown or any of the other stops. So my desire in this would be, so while I understand why we would want this, how come others don't, and why have they not invested? That to me is part of the understanding, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bresciani?
Thank you. My question is very similar to Councillor O'Donnell's, but maybe a little bit different. But the question I would like to know is, with the amount of people they employ at the airport, I had a tour out there and saw how many people. Why have we never, ever even had, why has this never ever come up before to even consider transit?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship. So I think the complexity at the airport is the shift work and how to look at alignment of service to the shift workers that are there. The other challenge, of course, is the infrastructure. So the roadway systems to and from the airport, most of them were not built to support transit. So those two have been the challenges in any high-level discussions that we've had.
Okay. One of the things that I know, like I say, when I did get the tour, wasn't with the new CO, it was the previous CO, and it was just in a conversation to for us to consider that, how important it is to the staff there. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Other speakers to the motion? Councillor Fundera?
Thank you, Worship. So I'm here through you, hearing from the administration saying that if this report comes to the administration, they'll have a better chance to report back to us then, what findings, or is that what this is all about?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, well, I think through the motion it provides clear direction as to what we would bring back for council to consider community and protective services.
Okay. So if because we do have different reports on different parts of our city, what are the pressures that we could be looking at first before we even look at the airport? Is there some places that we have that we're not there in the city itself? Your worship.
Onright?
Through your worship, I'll start and then I'll ask Mr. Looning to comment. Two areas that have come up recently are Viterra and Costco, the new development out on the East End. But I'll ask Mr. Looning to comment on how we kind of look at these areas. Council has provided direction on service standards that we do follow when we look at new areas of service.
Mr. Looning?
Through the chair, I'll echo what Mr. Onright said. The Aurora development in the East End and Westera are both areas that we know that we need to get to and serve. But beyond that, in the transit system as well, we look at how much service we are providing to current neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods would benefit from increased frequencies of service as well.
Okay, so to your worship, so this would be just to give a little bit high level overview of where are we, how close to the airport, what the cost would be, so that would all come to the community, right? So there's no any kind of financial ask for this. This is just simply go to you, you come back, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Fundera. Other speakers to the motion? Councillor Bresciani, could you take the chair, please?
Your worship.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. A couple of comments for context on this. This is not the first time we've had this discussion on whether we should provide transit service to the airport. This previous council has said no to that. There was discussion with the new CEO about this last year, and at that time with me with council, he mentioned to leave this issue with him that he would like a chance to think about this, because he says that in Victoria, it didn't work. It was not successful. For whatever reason, maybe those aren't transferable to Regina, but the idea of having transit service to the airport at that time didn't work. He asked for time to think about that, and it's in that context that I'm thinking maybe we're premature to prescribe in fair amount of detail the nature of an agreement to provide service. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I want this to come from the airport authority, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't think it's the city of Regina's responsibility to provide service to companies like Costco is one example. The GTH has been asking for quite a while. Why don't we provide transit out there? We've said no to them. So that's a principle I have that I'm concerned about. But more importantly, the CEO said he'd like to think about this and come back to the city of Regina about this. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on this one. I'm going to ask the city manager his comments on that to make sure that I'm correct. He's said he would come back with the way in which he'd like to engage the city on transit service.
Sorry.
Through you, Madam Chairman. The mayor is right. The conversations that took place when James Bogus became our new CEO at the airport was he took a different approach. He wanted to look at how he worked collaboratively with the city, looked at how he works with community partners in terms of advancing a number of initiatives at the airport. And one of those was transit. He did reference that the model in Victoria wasn't successful, although there was a demand that was coming from the community in terms of putting transit service in place, but it just proved not to be effective. Mr. Bogus has indicated that he'd like to have conversations regularly and quite frequently with the administration to look at what a potential transit or shuttle service to the airport would look like, and who would it serve? Would it primarily serve employees, or would it serve passengers arriving and departing from the airport? So he has definitely some very clear ideas and thought that he'd like to put forward. And of course, we would continue to engage in those conversations. But I mean, I think it's important that the airport, somewhat present a business case to the city, and then we can look at how does that fit within our transit priorities, and can we come to a solution that will work for both parties and work for the community?
Madam Chair, that's the point I want to get to, that I'm wondering if Councillor Stevens would agree to this, that we refer not this motion, but the issue of potential transit service to the airport and request a meeting with the airport authority to see what their views are. I guess better to come from them. If they know what they need more than we do, the cost could be significant. Otherwise, it could be over $1 million for that service. So I'm wondering if Councillor Stevens would agree to that. So it's a change in the steps involved, that the airport effectively come back to us as you were requesting. What are your ideas?
Councillor Stevens?
Well, no, I mean, the motion is precisely asking for that conversation to take place, but on our terms. And it's been 2 years, I believe, since that had originally been raised. So the motion is us leading a conversation about ensuring that lands identified in the transportation master plan have accessibility. And I understand this goes back to the early 1980s. So that conversation is part of this motion.
Your Worship.
Okay, I'm going to request a referral motion then, that the administration request the airport authority to come back to the city of Regina on their view on providing transit service to the airport, rather than this motion. This motion is too directive, is too granular, and may not be what's required in any case. So mine would be a referral motion, Madam Chair.
Okay. So there's no debate on that, right?
So to be clear, the motion is to refer the issue of providing transit to the airport authority to ask them for their plans for it, which is what the CEO wanted to do in any case. He said he wants to come back with that.
So you are wanting to refer it back to the administration?
Yes.
Okay. Is everyone clear on on the referral motion? Okay,
Can't debate it.
okay, yes, Councilor Murray?
To referral at all, someone just request in a timely manner.
I could ask the city manager when he thinks that's a reasonable time to.
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Madam Chair, obviously the first step in that conversation would be reach out to the CEO of the Airport Authority and ask him, when he would be prepared to come and have that conversation with us. I think it would be fair and reasonable to say that we'd like to see that within the next 3 months.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other, we will vote on the referral motion. All in favor?
Agreed.
Okay, so that's 1, 2. 5, 4. 5 in favor and against, opposed? 5. Sorry, against, yeah. Okay, the referral is defeated.
Any other speakers on it? Do you want to close debate? Councillor Stevens?
I would like to speak.
Oh, okay. Councillor Bryce, go right ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to repeat anything that's been said, but I will say that I know that the transportation plan for the airport, the CEO is talking about it and is actually looking at it. So I feel the referral motion was appropriate, and I was going to make the motion if nobody else did. So I'm not in favor of us just going ahead and doing this, ramming it through. I feel that it's something that has to be done in conjunction with the Airport Authority and ensuring that we're providing the right service to the right group. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Call the question there's no other speakers. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion's carried. We'll now move on to notice of, the next one is parking investments. Councillor Stevens.
Very early on, Councillor O'Donnell warned me that parking would take up a lot of my time, and he was very right, as usual. And I've drank the Kool-Aid. Fundamentally, this motion is about changing the way we think about parking revenues, and how we spend that revenue. If you look at the motion, administration report back to Community and Protective Services with a strategy and financial implications of committing a portion of parking meter revenue to the downtown and other areas where metered fares are collected, and administration considered the downtown deferred revenue account as a potential destination for parking revenue. To give a sense of the money on the table here, we collect about $1.8 million through parking meter revenue. By comparison, we collect about $3.1 million through parking enforcement fines. There are other sources of revenue with parking, but the metered fare is really where I'm looking here. In the motion, it also mentions infrastructure, and I'm not trying to be prescriptive here, but I'm inviting administration to think very broadly about what that might mean. For instance, using revenue to implement enhanced seating, lighting, parking, and bike amenities in Victoria Park, which is a centerpiece of downtown. Just as one example, using revenue collected through downtown meters as an example. So it's not just about roads and sidewalks. It's about taking a portion of that money, committing it to those areas where that money is collected. And this is kind of where the downtown deferred revenue account comes in. By comparison, if we look at Saskatoon, half of their annual parking revenue is committed to their urban design group to hire staff and pay for streetscape development in the downtown, Riversdale, and Broadway. And if you see those areas where meters have expanded, it's a question about planning and investment as much as it is about parking enforcement. And the outcome kind of speaks for itself if you see the kind of investment that has rolled out since the 1980s in that area. With luck, it also changes the conversation in the city about parking meters. And we had that conversation abruptly during the 2019 budget deliberations when we proposed meters around the General Hospital. And some residents, rightfully, they were concerned, but others said, well, if you're going to put meters there, what about investing that money? So the conversation in the public could change if it becomes an investment in that streetscape and in that community, and not just go back into general revenue where it is spent. Downtown's mentioned here, just to be clear, has a special place in the OCP. It's also where most of the parking meter revenue is collected. But the implication in the lettering of this motion suggests that if there are meters there, this kind of policy would apply. And finally, with the downtown revenue account, I think it's a result of an office area zone policy that puts money into this account to be used for parking, transit, or other amenities in the downtown area. So again, looking for a report, changing the understanding of parking meter revenue, and seeing it invested in the renewal of the technology that makes parking more user-friendly, more resident-friendly, as well as investing in those communities. And that's what I'm seeking here today, and I hope I can
Seconder
count
for
on
that, please.
Council's support.
Seconder for it. Okay, Councilor Bersiani. Councilor Bryce.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, what do we currently do with the parking meter revenue?
Holden? Well, we got two standing already.
Go ahead.
Mr. Weary?
There's no dedicated source for the parking revenue. It goes into the general revenue fund and funds city programs generally, just including overhead for parking enforcement.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know if we're already doing something like this, that the motion's asking us to. How do we pay for this stuff normally?
Mr. Holden?
So through your worship, we budget funds annually to cover our costs. So there is funds that are in our capital budget, and obviously there's funds in our operating budget to pay our contractor. So the funds are considered and approved in the budget annually by council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Councilor Murray?
Through the chair, just questions around the governance of releasing funds from the DDRA. How is that? What mechanism is that?
Ms. Harlech?
Your worship, so we'll bring a report forward to council, and council makes decisions regarding that account specifically, but we'll make recommendations based on evaluation criteria that we have established regarding that account.
Okay, is there input from the Downtown Business Improvement District of what those would be?
Through you, your worship. We do consult at times with the downtown bid for that. Recently, we have approved funding to take out $150,000 for the new pavilion going forward.
Okay, thanks. And my next question is actually for the mover and also our liaison for the downtown bid. Was this something that they requested for specific funds to use for it, or like was there projects that they specifically are looking for, or is this just to refill the account?
Councilor Stevens.
Just to be clear, this isn't coming on behalf of the bid. There had been conversations that had taken up some time at those meetings. But no, it's not specifically focused on an account. However, it's there. There's a policy in place, and there is a plan for populating or generating revenue, or putting revenue, into the downtown revenue account. So this is kind of a balancing of a larger parking strategy with conversations I've had with the bid and members of the bid, and specifically downtown business owners that want to see that money invested into sidewalks and amenities that enhance the downtown experience.
Thanks for the clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Fundera.
Make a motion through you. So in this motion, it talks about specific percentage of that parking meter goes directly to downtown for different projects. Is that going to impact anything that we do elsewhere? You have to take something from someone to specifically dedicate to downtown. Is that going to change the plan, change the percentage?
Mr. Onright, with this one? Oh, Mr. Holden. Okay.
Through your worship. So there are recommendations, I guess, in the motion. One is if we were to take a percentage of parking revenue and dedicate that to downtown investment, then obviously right now that funding is being put into the general revenue. So obviously, we'd have to make a decision to not invest somewhere else. And of course, if we use the downtown deferred revenue, it'll just be a prioritization of projects as to where we allocate those funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Badera. Other speakers? Councilor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a question. Is this done in any other city that you know of?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, to the best of my knowledge, it is done in a few municipalities where reserves are set up, not specific to a DDRA, but where they take parking revenue, set up a reserve, and then use that money to replace, enhance specific parking assets. So it could be parking stations, could be new meters, but not that I'm aware of. Maybe Mr. Kyle is aware of municipalities that use the money to do more of a urban enhancement around some design work and that type of work. Not that I'm aware of.
So just one last question in regards to the how do we right now, like the sidewalks, and we talk about the streetscape downtown, how are those things monitored to know when the sidewalks, because there are some crumbling sidewalks and there are some things downtown that we know need work. I mean, I'm not sure, but I mean, I think that's kind of people are worried that sometimes the downtown doesn't get kept up. So this is a designated, source of revenue to go there. But how are those projects? I mean, I think that's maybe the worry. So how do we know that those sidewalks and how that they actually get, on the list and they're getting dealt with?
All right.
Through your worship, so the capital improvements for downtown, things like sidewalks and streets specifically, would come through our transportation and roadways capital work, and that is on a priority list. So when we think about the consulting work we've started or about to start on Saskatchewan Drive, the work that's being done on Victoria Avenue, it's not as simple as just taking 10 feet of sidewalk and doing the repair. We know that 11th Avenue is on that list coming forward here in the next couple of years, that entire street between Broad and Albert Street will be looked at as a whole. So that when you go in and do this work, you're doing the entire thing to change it over, because there will be utility work, whether it be water, whether it be energy, power, SaskTel, there would be utility work that would be required at the same time. So it's coordinating those efforts to all be done at once. I wouldn't see the DDRA fund funding something like sidewalk repair. And maybe Ms. Howrelak can add to what that fund would be utilized for, is utilized for today.
Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, typically the DDRA has been earmarked to advance things in the OCP. With respect to right now, it's been more focused on urban design. So you'll see the new visual identity signage that we have on the corner and throughout the downtown. Part of those funds went towards that. The pavilion, so it'll be to enhance the downtown with respect to meeting the objectives of the OCP, but providing those typically urban design or those customer service experiences that like the pavilion will provide to the downtown area. But the funds in the account are limited because the revenue that funds it is based on, there's only two funding sources for that, and it has to do with the buildings that are going over podium and then parking outside of the downtown. So the funds are limited to approximately, I believe, we have one report coming forward asking for another $25,000 to be coming out of that account. And if that should be approved, we'd only have $340,000. And that would be over the next 5 years. That's how much would be there, because it's a trickle-in effect based on agreements that we have with developers. So it's not a sustainable revenue source for that account.
Okay, good. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bresciani. Other speakers? Councilor Bresciani, can you take the chair, please?
Mayor Fougere?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I sort of like this idea a bit with some understanding by the mover on this, and I'll have some general comments on where the money may go. When you speak of a portion, what does that mean? That's a pretty vague category. All of it, half it, a third of it, 10%? Is there any idea when you say a portion?
Councillor Stevens?
I deliberately left that ambiguous so administration could craft a number. I think what I would like to see is maybe an environmental scan of what other jurisdictions do as well as the outcome. Again, I use that Saskatoon example. My understanding is it's 50%. I didn't have a number. I wanted us to balance the needs of other areas where the parking revenue could be spent, but also make a meaningful impact in those communities and have a sustainable revenue source for the DDRA. So I didn't want to be prescriptive deliberately.
Yeah, I wish it would have been a number to give a better direction, but that being said, I know the RD bid has been wanting this for a while, to use some of this revenue to do projects that they'd like to see. And I know the pavilion we have going downtown is an example of a joint movement on this one. I would think you have a couple of comments. I have 4 comments. The first one is a portion. I'd like to see more detail on what that looked like. That it not deter or detract from other projects we would use this money for around the city. So there's a balance that's got to be done here. And I'm concerned about pulling away from projects that are duly noted by the budget process that we take away from there. And I want this money to be very clearly designed to further the downtown neighborhood plan. The administration talked about the OCP. I'm talking about the plan itself, which we approved by council about 7 or 8 years ago, that we jointly understand what those projects would look like with the RD bid, who they themselves should contribute finances as well. They're stakeholders that want to see things happen, and I agree completely with downtown enhancing it, that it'd be cost shared with RD bid in some way. I think it's only fair they make that contribution as well. On that basis, that kind of understanding, I can support the motion. I'm somewhat reluctant only because of this notion of a portion is too nebulous. The administration obviously has to come back with the definition of what that looked like, and I'd suggest that it not detract from other projects that money goes to. This may have been answered. I'm going to ask the question again, Madam Chair, is how do we actually replenish the downtown deferred revenue account now? Where's the money come from?
Ms. Harlock?
With you, Madam Chairman. The way it gets replenished is through agreements. So when Mosaic, as an example, when the tower was built, we enter into agreements because it's based on a square footage over podium. And so there's an agreement with Harvard that they pay us X amount of dollars every year for so many years. The other way, so that's one way, is through the downtown larger buildings that get built. The other way is that it's if someone in the office areas outside of the downtown want to increase their parking requirements above what our maximums are, then they can do that, but they have to pay into that, and we've only had that utilized once. So there's only those 2 funding mechanisms.
So, Madam Chair, the idea of since the money comes from those companies like Mosaic and Harvard who built the design under the downtown neighborhood plan, the podium, et cetera, it's only right that the money go to those projects in the neighborhood plan itself, those priorities. Those things in the public realm that are important, like sidewalks, light standards, those things that need improving, that are part of the downtown neighborhood plan. So if we have that understanding of what it would look like, again, third time, not restricting other projects around the city, I'll support the motion.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, they just need to come back with the details.
We're actually at the speaker. You spoke once already. You can't.
Can you have my time?
You can't. Sorry. Councilor Dowell. Sorry, Councilor Marie, I can't do that. Sorry.
Thanks.
Councilor Dowell.
I wanted to think this through a little bit and listen to a little bit of the argument, so I will not support it, Andrew, and I'll explain why. So I think it was a large step when council decided that they would take a dedicated fund through tax to do residential roads. That was kind of unique, I think, in terms of our little history here. If you venture out of the city and you sometimes go to a hotel and you look at your bill and you read, you will see that on the bill there's a dedicated tax. I use the word tax again. It may go toward a stadium or a road or whatever it happens to be. So the notion of dedicated funds, I think, falls within a particular category. So what's here kind of scares me a little bit, because if I start with this dedicated fund or this dedicated notion here, then what's the next one and what's the next one? So to me, I first want to have a philosophical discussion among council and so on as to how we would do those things and handle them. So that's kind of one. But I think this can also be handled through the budget process, which is what we have before us already. I don't think that it's lacking merit. It's lacking in the way that it is to be done that I can't support.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Speakers to the motion? Councillor Stevens, you want to close debate? Okay. I'll call the question. Are those in favor of the motion? Okay. Those opposed?
Opposed.
What's that? 4 in favor, 5 against. Motion is defeated. So we'll move on to the notice of motion, and I'm going to ask the movers to read, not the preamble, but the motion itself. Either Councillor Hawkins or Stevens can read the Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll read the recital. Therefore, be it resolved that, 1, the Mayor, on behalf of Regina City Council, write to the Premier of Saskatchewan, the Minister of Central Services, and the Chair of the Provincial Capital Commission, asking that a public inquiry, led by an independent chair, be appointed to inquire into all aspects of the application for the construction of the proposed Brant office building in Wascana Park, the said inquiry to have full authority to gather oral and written evidence, including correspondence, reports, and meeting minutes, and all other relevant evidence for the purpose of making that information part of the public record and for the purpose of making recommendations with respect to the application. And 2, further consideration of the application and any construction activity associated with it be halted pending the recommendation of the inquiry.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Now, next motion, notice of motion. Councillor Young or O'Donnell, please read just the motion itself. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a transparency motion slated to go to the Provincial Capital Commission table. Whereas the public has a great interest in Wascana...
Well, just the motion, the resolution, not the whereas clauses.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Be it resolved that Regina City Council requests the Government of Saskatchewan as the landowner of property leased to CNIB and through CNIB to Brant Industries, provide the processes required for development of any property in Wascana Centre as outlined in the Wascana Centre Master Plan 2016. Secondly, the processes that have been completed in reference to the government-owned property currently leased to CNIB and leased by CNIB to Brant Industries. And third, the processes that have yet to be completed as required by the Wascana Centre Master Plan and the requirements outlined by the Provincial Capital Commission Board. 2, this information and any other development in Wascana Centre be available to the public, including on the Wascana Centre website. And 3, which is more broad, the Government of Saskatchewan share with the public on an ongoing basis the major work of the Provincial Capital Commission and the PCC Board, including regular updates of any development plan for Wascana Centre and the ongoing care of Wascana Centre as prescribed by the Wascana Centre Master Plan 2016.
Thank you, Councillor Young. That's good.
Can
No
I
debating.
make a comment
Nope,
on this?
Nope, no
Okay.
debating, no comment, just reading the motions out is allowed
Okay.
under the under the terms of advance notice. We're going to move on to the 2 bylaws that remain for business tonight. Councillor Barchiani.
2019-4, the Housing Incentive Program Tax Exemption Bylaw, and 2019-9, the Vehicles for Hire Bylaw. I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws 2019-4 and 2019-9 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2019-4 and 2019-9 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that council hereby consents to bylaws 2019-4, 2019-9 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Councillor Bryce, are you there?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Those opposed? It's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaws 2019-4 and 2019-9 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thanks, everyone, and need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Brashani, Councillor Murray seconds that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, everybody, and have a great evening.
It has to be our quickest council meeting ever. Yeah.